Hi, my name is Rachel Honda from StraitJacket podcast.
I'm Jeff from Mental Health Resource.
And I'm Viking Barbie.
Welcome.
Hi.
So, Kaylee, if you could just give us a little bit of a background and story about, how you got to where you are now, and basically your life story.
Well, I mean, I came from Texas early on when I was younger, and I had like a pretty wild, chaotic life. My parents were wild. My mom was a dancer, and my dad was like a wrestler and a criminal and all that stuff. So I had like a really wild upbringing. And I basically came out to California because he was an actor. He ended up playing Bane in Batman and Robin.
Oh, wow.
And then he passed when I was like 12. And he was also, an addict and all that stuff. So there's that. And then later on, I ended up, going through the whole goth phase in middle school and high school. And I just started getting into drugs really deeply. I started doing like a lot of cocaine and a lot of like drinking and going out and stuff like that. And I had arrived thing,
Mm-hmm.
What were like some of the feelings that like prompted that behavior?
I was pretty I had a lot of mental health issues for sure. I'm sure that a lot of it came from trauma. I mean, I know a lot of it came from trauma because I've worked through it now, and I'd have like none of those issues, barely. Like I have little triggers, but it's not like it was before. And I definitely was like deep in depression, just kind of felt really empty all the time, felt kind of lonely.
How long would you say you felt that way?
My whole life. I've always felt like an alien. I've always felt a little bit like I didn't fit in, and like I was an only child, which, you're always kind of battling alone, feeling things. And so I always kind of felt like, when I went and got loaded, I felt like I could relate to people. You know what I mean? Like I was like, all right, like I actually like people when I'm high, but I don't really care for them when I'm not, because they don't, like, it's almost like it dumbs you down a little bit. Not to say that people are dumb, but just like it puts you on the level of everyone, kind of like you're able to like connect a little more. And now, even being sober now, I feel definitely like an outcast, but I embrace it more and I enjoy it. And I connect with the right people. But yeah, so I started doing a lot of drugs then, and then I ended up running away from home around 17. I started stripping around 17. Well, I was kind of dabbling when I was like 15 to 17. And then I ran away from home with a boy, and we basically were like on the run until I turned 18. I started like, slanging my own stuff, and I was working at the strip club, and it was like really fun until it wasn't,
Right.
So it just got worse and worse for me. Everyone started to kind of get out of it, and I just kept getting like more into the painkillers, more into like, I stopped drinking and just doing painkillers and cocaine. And then I ended up really getting into the opiates, tried to stop for a while because I had had gotten like pregnant, and I thought like I ended up detoxing myself. And then that didn't work out. It just kind of, obviously you're detoxing yourself, so like it basically, you can't like keep a viable pregnancy because they wanted you to go on like methadone, which you can't really, I'm not going to go on methadone pregnant. I just thought it was horrible. Not to shame anyone who does, but I didn't want like a baby born like that.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, I'm not doing that. And I detoxed the way they told me not to. And I was like, if it happens, it happens. Then it's meant to be. You know what I mean? So I was sober after that. And then I was like, yeah, of course, I started dabbling again, thinking I could like drink or, let's go out. Like I can have a drink. It's fine. I just won't do pills. And then I ended up back on pills again. And I'm fully doing 40, Norcos a day and like doing like a gram of Coke a day. And then before you know it, you can't get pills, and then you're all of a sudden on heroin within the blink of an eye. So.
And at that point, were you diagnosed with
I've been
depression,
diagnosed.
anxiety, anything?
I wasn't diagnosed until I got sober.
Okay.
So I was diagnosed with, from one therapist that I went to, I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, which I feel like is a co-occurring condition that happens to a lot of female addicts.
Right. And it stems from trauma. So
right.
If you address
abandonment, things like that. You know, my parents were wild. They did the best of what they had kind of thing, but it's like, you know, two young parents that are like really wild, you know. I just perceived that as a kid as like, you know, abandonment.
Normal.
Yeah. So, and my mom also has her own issues, you know, like she's I think had like a lot of borderline traits when I was younger, just very like very emotional, very sensitive. And then she'd always date narcissists. It was, you know, a thing. And then I went to another therapist after a breakup, and I was sober still. They diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, which I was just like, what the hell? Like I didn't never even heard people having that together. And so I was like, all right, I guess I gotta do, you know, and they always say like narcissists can't like go to therapy. They don't want to go to therapy or whatever. And I was like, okay, maybe it's the narcissist in me. I was like, I'm going to be the best narcissist there ever was. So I don't know. It's like, I'm not going to be that person. Like I'm going to be different, you know, maybe it saved me, my narcissism. But I started going to therapy more. And then I just kind of ended up meeting a guy who he was like a life coach, and he said, I don't believe in diagnosis like that. He's like, it's trauma and it's responses to trauma, and everyone has patterns based on how they are protecting the inner child, you know. And so I was like, all right, I'm willing to bite, you know, because everybody else says I basically need to be on meds and I need to do this and do that. And I'm like, you know, it wasn't getting better. I was almost getting worse, because I feel like when you do that rumination therapy, you're just like feeding the beast in a way. You know, you're talking about it. You're getting, if you're not doing it properly and getting it out, you're essentially just like telling yourself a story and believing it, you know? So I was afraid to say, I'm not a narcissist, because that's what they all say. So I was like, all right, well, I'm willing to try this. And then he did a year program, which he graduated me from. And it was like deep, intense inner child work, like crazy trauma work. It was rough, but honestly, like it changed everything. Like nothing like I was, and none of the patterns that I was doing that would have gotten me diagnosed. Right. So I actually have, you know, anytime I have anything come up, I literally call this guy and I'm like, all right, I'm having some stuff. And he'll be like, all right, close your eyes, go into your, you know, and we feel like it's a lot of somatic stuff, a lot of like, and honestly, like life-changing. So I give everyone, you know, his name's 𝐬𝐿𝐾. He's amazing. Yeah, I always try and get people on him. But yeah, so I ended up getting clean 13 years ago, originally at the Rock Center, like the original Rock Center that was in Garden Grove. And it was like low bottom, indigent rehab, like, you know, 12 steps, no meds, all that. I was there for 3 months. And then I was the manager at the sober living upstairs for another like 3 to 6 months. I forget how many months it was. I was taking the bus every day. I was, you know, doing like, you know, I didn't have anything. I started kind of like working at the strip club day shift. You know, I didn't know what else to do. You know what I mean? But I was really happy. You know, I didn't have shit, but I was really happy. And it was the first time I'd ever been actually sober. I was completely insane. I hadn't gotten any mental health help really. So I was this was all program carrying me, and which I believe like so heavily in is like program, because like if it was able to keep me sober for so long without, I mean, I only started with Glenn maybe like a year or 2 years ago. Wow. You know, 2 years ago, I think. So like it was a long time until I got real help, you know? So yeah, I definitely, and I came out of jail. I got arrested. I forgot that part. So you have any questions?
And so, yeah, so when back to, I guess, your childhood. So you started getting introduced to drugs, can you go more into like that time of your life?
Into getting introduced to it?
Yeah.
I mean, I was 13 or 14 and I looked like I was 19, you know, and I had friends. We'd go to like Sunset Boulevard and wait outside, and the bouncers would get us into the clubs.
At 13?
Yeah. People were racking up lines, and, you know, and there was a band we hung out with. I won't say the name, but like we went back to a hotel room and they were like, you know, doing coke, and that was the first time I ever did coke, and I was like, this is so good. Like, this is awesome. I feel happy for the first time in my life. And then, you know, and I did a lot of high school parties. We just go to high school parties, and it was such an escape for me, you know, like you just get to go out and be rebellious. I have such like a rebellious nature. You know, I'm like, you guys are probably not in astrology, but I'm an Aquarius moon. Okay. So I have that like super rebellious like nature about me, where I just like, I get my kicks out of like kind of, you know, shocking people and stuff like that, and going out and doing the thing I'm not supposed to do.
The shock value, I guess. Yeah.
So it was fun for me. It was like an adventure every weekend, you know, and then I just didn't want to stop. I didn't want it to ever stop, you know, and then it stopped being not fun, like at all. You know, it's weird how that happens.
Yeah, I guess when did that switch happen for you? Like where you're like, okay, I need to get help.
I was pretty diehard dope fiend. Like it was pretty like people would be like, don't you just want to get sober? Yeah. There's this show called Intervention. We're thinking of calling. I'm like, if you call Intervention, you're never going to talk to me again. Like I'm not doing this. I would tell people like, I want to die a dope fiend. Like I don't want to live like if I'm not high. And so when I did get sober, people were like, there is no way you're sober. Like they would always ask me, like friends would be like, okay, but how much are you doing? Like, really, how much are you doing? Like, what are you really doing? Just a little bit. I'm like, I swear to God, I'm sober. And like, it took people like a good, like 2 years to start really believing that I could get sober. So I'm like, I'm always like, if I could do it, like people look at me, they're like, yeah, but you're you. And I'm like, you don't understand how I was. Like I was the worst, like the filthiest, scummiest, like dope fiend. And on top of that, I was not a nice person. I was robbing drug dealers. I was doing all kinds of crazy shit. So like, you know, there was not like a lot of redeeming things about me at that time. But I was very like smart and I was able to make things happen for myself no matter what. And I never had to like, I kind of like, it was my claim to like feeling good about myself that I didn't have to like sleep around for dope, or I didn't have to do that. Like I danced, but I'd never had to like sleep with anyone for a sack or something because I was clever. I was, you know, I was trying to be like the kingpin, if anything. I thought I was like the man, you know, like, so that's kind of how I did things.
So then when you were in that like lifestyle, then what made you go to the Rock Center and commit to that?
Well, I got arrested 2011 for possession like of large usable quantities of, well, is what they said, of heroin and cocaine outside of a house party I did with my friend. We were in the car counting money and the cops came over. It was in Fountain Valley and they were like, we're going to search the car. And I was like, we're just counting money. We'll leave. And he's like, my friends weren't on drugs. They were like completely in the dark. It was like one of my best friends. And so she was like, it's fine. Like, we don't have anything, you know? And I was like, shit, it was the one time too. It's such a God shot that like, you'd think like at the time I was like, God, I have the worst luck. But really it was like the best luck that the one time I didn't put my shit in my bra, cause they didn't check my bra. The one time I didn't put it in there, I put it in my purse. Never did that. You know what I mean? So I was like, it was meant to get caught that night. I don't think I was going to make it much longer, honestly. So the guy was like, you know, okay, we got to take you in. And my friend was like, what the fuck's going on? I'm like, oh, I had an empty bag that had a little Coke residue. Like, it's fine. And then he literally went up. She told me later that he went up and he's like, your friend's really fucked up, you know? And I was like, damn it, fucking ratted me out. You know what I mean? Like, so then I went to booking and then they put me in the OCJ. I was in there it was like a 3-day weekend. So I wasn't able to get out like the way I wanted to, which was like the next, you know what I mean? Like I couldn't like get out or anything. I had to go to court. So they had me in there for like 3 full days. So I was kicking heroin. It was so gnarly. And they are terrible there. Like, thank God they are. I honestly, like, everything I see now is like, thank God. You know what I mean? Like, because I never wanted to go through it again. Right. But at the time I was like, these people are like evil. You know what I mean? Like, there was like women, I saw someone that died in there because of malnutrition or dehydration from the same thing. That when I went in there, they did not come and check on me. They're like, oh, she's an addict. She'll get over it. Like, she's just kicking. And my bunkie kept pushing the emergency button because she's like, this chick's not doing well. Like, she's going to die in the cell. And like, thank God I didn't. But they ended up taking my clothes, stripping me naked. For the last 48 hours, I was on the floor without any bedding. They took my mattresses because I kept puking on them. And I was like, basically just like, throwing up and, shitting myself in the toilet
jail's
naked.
already horrible. I can't imagine
it was
also.
horrible. And not only that, you're like hallucinating. You're like, there's like all kinds of crazy shit. I was like, I'm not going to make it. And then I had to go to court, and they put me on this bus, and I was filling the bottom of the bus up with vomit. People were lifting their feet, and we're all like handcuffed together, and I just kept throwing up. I couldn't stop. I threw up. I could have died from like dehydration. Yeah. Like it's not hard, like throwing up that long and that bad, and I couldn't eat.
And they didn't know how much you were using.
And I would drink water and it would come right. Like I couldn't even keep it down. So I was like on this bus, and like I got to court, and then something happened where like the fluid from my lungs from smoking it so bad, like went into my ears, so I couldn't hear. So I couldn't hear the judge, and they had to like write things down for me. I was so
I didn't even
weird.
know that could happen.
I honestly didn't know that could happen either until it happened to me, and it went away after like a few days. But it sounded like my ears were underwater, and I couldn't hear anybody. And the only thing I could think, I was like, it must be all the fluid, coming out. But yeah, it was crazy. I was throwing up in the courtroom. I was like, the whole thing. So then when I got out, my mom was like, my public defender was like, I'm going to call your mom. And I'm like, I'm literally like 25 years old. Like, what do you mean? Like, and she goes, your teeth are going to fall out. You're going to die. All this stuff. I'm like, why are you going to call my mom? Like, I was the weirdest thing, but she literally took it upon herself to call my mom and tell her everything, that like I was on heroin, all this stuff. Even my mom was suspicious, but she didn't really know. And then, so my mom was able to help me get into the Rock Center. She came and like, was like, we're going to put you in a program. Like, if you don't go into a program, you're never going to go to drug court. You're never going to get this stuff done. I mean, I was going to get out and get high. I was going to come right back, you know? It was that revolving door. The second you get hemmed up the first time and you don't get it together, you're fucked. You're just basically like going back and forth. So we got into the Rock Center at that point. And I didn't want to get sober, I was like, I'm not going to be sober. I'm just going to do this, get it over with, get the court thing done, and then I'm going to go back out because I don't want to be sober. And then I started doing like this, got a sponsor. They made me get a sponsor. They made me go through all these meetings, and I was like, what the fuck is this? They're like, you'll hear something. And I'm like, I'm not hearing anything. It took me a while, and then I was a crazy person in there. I wasn't doing any of my chores. I was just sitting there. I was like, they all thought I was going to get 5150 because I almost got 5150 like twice, because I was like self-harming so bad. You know what I mean? Like I was like burning, my whole arms were like lighter burns, because it gets you like kind of high.
Yeah,
it like does
feels
like
something.
It does like the lighter burn thing was like causing like some kind of opiate release. Like it made me go to sleep.
What the?
Yeah. So
I'm learning so much.
I
didn't know
don't
that
learn
our
these
bodies
things.
could do this.
Don't learn these things. So yeah, basically I was in there, and then I just started. Someone said something to me of like, everyone's making bets on how long you're until you get kicked out, kind of thing. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna fight, because me, I'm like, all right, we'll see,
I'll beat this.
And then I was one of the only people that actually made it, So I pushed, and I ended up loving it and wanting it after that. And then I had relapsed a little bit after a few years, and then I went straight back. Like I always went back. And so now I have about 8 years again, but I would have had 13 if I would have stayed completely sober the whole time.
8 years is still a long time.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it's amazing. And it's like you already had that foundation, so I feel like it makes it a little easier after that.
Yeah, it went wild. Me using was not a pretty sight. So I was like, living in filth, and I'm already not like the tidiest person. Like I have to have maids. I have to have people doing my laundry. Like I will not do it. I will literally keep buying clothes. So like you can imagine, there was just like, it was disgusting.
It was crazy.
Like people don't look at me and think of the way I would have lived. You know what I mean? But like there was like maggots everywhere and shit. It was gnarly.
And so now with your now about like mental health, when you go back to the work you did with, what was his name again? Sorry.
Oh, Glenn.
Yeah. Before you met with him, were you doing any other work for your mental health?
Yeah, I went to a couple different therapists. There was one that I was going to for a few years, and I always just felt like it was like, it's a weird thing to say, but it's like sex without an orgasm. You know what I mean? Like
Just
you're never
not,
finishing it. You're never getting it out. You know what I mean? It's kind of like a dick tease, therapy. So I was like, I did it because everyone said to do it, because especially with, probably have ADHD. There's a lot of things in there going on, but I basically started working with him, and I was like, oh, we're actually getting to the bottom of this and like pulling it out. It's kind of, there's like some EMDR vibes to it with the way they do, like where he did some like pulling and like processing. But it wasn't just that. It was like going back in your timeline, revisiting things that trigger you that you don't even know trigger you, like listening to your intuition, listening to your inner self, and like pulling it out and basically processing it and forgiving and doing those things actively. And like, then when you would go back, he would make me keep going back to the same thing until I didn't feel anything anymore.
Do you know what it's called? The type of therapy?
He kind of created it. He wrote 3 books.
Oh, wow.
So he has 3 books out right now.
Yeah, because I mean, it sounds similar to EMDR.
He takes a little bit from every of his favorite fields, and he kind of just made his own thing. And it was just weird how I found him up, because I was like looking for a new therapist. And I was like, I can't, like, I'm going crazy again. I was like kind of losing it. And then I went, nobody would take me. Everyone's like, oh, we're full. And there's a part of me that was like, because I was telling them what my diagnosis was, that they were like, oh, we're not going to have someone who's got NPD come in here and just waste our time kind of thing. And like, that's kind of the vibe I was getting, because I'm like, why wouldn't I've never had a problem finding a therapist.
Which is so sad, because that's like, okay, I don't know. For me, I like when people do have personality disorders, because actually you can really work with that. Like and there's ways, like for BPD, like DBT really does work. And
DBT is very similar in a way to the 12 steps. There's a lot of correlations. It's like the, like coping and taking accountability and things like that. Like, I think basically what really gets you clean is, for me, the program is the way to go. I've, taking accountability, because that's a huge thing for us, is like being able to be accountable for your part in things, which, like, dealing with so many addicts in my life, that's the one thing that I'm always like, take some accountability for your part, for your life. Take responsibility for your life. Oh, well, this person did this. Well, what are you going to do about it? You know what I mean? Like, stop blaming everybody else, or you're never going to get better. You know what I mean? Because people have their own shit. They have their own trauma, their own issues, and they're doing the best with what they got. But if you depend on them to keep you well, you're going to be screwed, So like, that's a big thing, is like the accountability thing. And then like the resentments. I see people, so many people just stewing in anger and resentment all the time. Like, that person did me dirty. And like, even like the smallest things, someone cuts them off and they're just like, it's like that anger. You got to let that shit go. You got to like clean up your side of things. Be like, well, maybe you're in a bad mood today. Maybe you triggered somebody else. You don't know. You know what I mean? Like, and those things are the things that keep you sober, in my opinion. You could be as crazy, nuttier than squirrel turds. But if you're like taking accountability, being honest, another huge one is like, so many people don't want to be like fearlessly honest. They're so shameful. They're sitting in like this constant like state of like, oh man, like I can't let everyone know who I am. I can't let, that's going to keep you fucked up. Yeah. Like, let it go. Don't worry about all that shit, because none of it matters. Like at the end of the day, we're all just driving skin suits around anyways in this floating rock. You know what I mean? Like, who gives a shit what this guy thinks?
It's true.
Get your shit together. Love the people around you, be honest, do all those things, and you're going to be sober, But if you keep lying and you keep trying to do the old behavior, or you keep passing the buck,
manipulating,
passing the buck. It's because my mom, it's because my dad, it's because it's like, no, because you're an adult now. Fix your shit, heal your inner child, and stop making excuses. So big one. I'm a big advocate of 12 steps, and then doing the trauma work and inner child work, huge. Meditation, huge.
He's super into meditation. Yeah.
Is there any advice that you'd have for people that have been diagnosed with BPD or borderline personality disorder?
Oh, it's a hard one. It's a really, when you're in it and your symptoms are really bad. One of the things that I would definitely give my honest advice would be, if you're newly getting sober, especially, or if you're trying to fix or work on yourself, stay out of a relationship for a while, because that's pretty much what triggers the whole thing. You could be borderline and be out of a relationship and be completely fine and be like, I'm cured. And the second you get in a relationship, because it's an abandonment. It's an abandonment thing, you know? And so,
and as you open up, then
right.
you're vulnerable and all those, the interpersonal
so
chaos
working
starts.
on inner child processing, things like that out of the relationship, and then get into a relationship. Yeah. Because I feel like that's where you're going to be triggered, and you want people to trigger you, because wherever the triggers are, that's where the work needs to be done. And I also I'm not a doctor, but I implore people to just not take a diagnosis as an identity.
Yeah. That's what a lot of people
You're not
do
your
these days.
diagnosis. You don't have to be. I know doctors be like, that's not true, but I'm telling you, I was diagnosed as borderline. I was diagnosed as NPD. I don't have any of the behavioral traits or the patterns that I had once I worked through it.
Yep.
I don't. So yes, there are little triggers that pop up, but I'm able to process and cope on my own way. I don't need drugs. I don't need to lash out. I don't think I'm being abandoned every 5 seconds. Just work on yourself, and then it will happen. You don't have to be borderline your whole life. You don't have to be that.
Do you think of facilities, like an inpatient facility, is the best way to start that process, or do you think just going to therapy?
I think people need to get sober. I think they need to go to rehab. I think people that are trying to do it themselves, it's just going to spin their wheels, because for one, you're not dealing with what the problem actually is. The problem is you've got issues and the drugs and the alcohol are the solution, So they're not the problem. They're the thing that's helping you to cope with the issues you're having. So I think a mixture of both. When I went into the program, I was doing the 12 steps. My sponsor, the first thing she said was get a therapist. You know what I mean? So
that's awesome.
Because there's a couple things, being healthy, taking care of yourself, that shows self-love, but not trying to take on everything at once. I think a lot of people just run into the program and they're trying to they're like, I'm going to get everything, just give yourself grace, get a sponsor, 12 steps, do all that. And then, have some mental health help. But I really think rehab, detox first, always. Yeah,
and you have to get sober first, because
no
one can diagnose you even until you get sober.
Yeah, I had a friend who was schizophrenic. I'm like, you're on meth, bro.
Exactly.
And sometimes you can get perma-fried and stay schizophrenic, but when she was sober, she wasn't schizophrenic. So I'm like, you really you can't get diagnosed on drugs,
Even newly sober, my interns will be like, oh, isn't this person borderline? I'm like, let's wait, because newly sober, your emotions are all over the place.
Yeah, newly sober is nuts too. I was a mess. But yeah, it's important. I had a treatment place. I had a sober living called the Viking House a few years back, but I wasn't able to keep the doors open after a while. But it helped a lot of people. We had some people, we would have them come in for free just because to be managers or something at some point, or to help with something. But of course, you can't, if you're not getting the rent paid, eventually I was like, all right, I paid, a good amount of money a month to keep the doors open for a while. And then I was like, all right, this isn't working. So
I like the name of it though. The Viking House.
It was a sober living. So it's a little different than having a full inpatient rehab, which there's an ability to make a little more to be able to keep the doors open, There's actually a lot more compared to sober living. But yeah, I just wanted to do something to get the word out, So I'm basically trying to do that.
How did that project go for you?
It was a cool experience. It was a cool experience to kind of just to do it and say I did it,
What do you think? I know you've done a lot of different projects, but what do you think was the most, inspiring for you, or made you grow the most?
The project on myself.
Yeah.
It's been build a bitch for a while now. I don't know. I've done a lot of music too. So I've released music
I
about
did
sobriety
see
and
one
mental
of
health.
your, videos. You're really good.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
that's
have
amazing.
a song called Broken Wings that's about mental health and sobriety. I have a song called December that's about being borderline, which, like I said, when I say borderline, I use that term loosely. I call it triggers and reactions. We just happen to have different ones. But yeah, so I really just like to, I kind of feel like I have to be alive for this. There must be why. I'm a pretty spiritual person, so. But you don't have to be sober, just, you can figure it out as you go.
And people have different meaning of what spirituality is and all that. So
yeah.
So now what do you see for yourself in the future? What do you want to accomplish?
Well, I really want to have lots of animals. I keep accruing new animals. It's my favorite. It's just being around animals. But just continuing on, just putting the word out there and just being creative and using my platform for something rather than just, and it's funny because it's a lot of TNA and sexy stuff and everything, but you know what, whatever gets it out there.
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah, because it shocks people. People will be like, oh, there's my ass and titties one day. And then they're like, I put up like a sobriety post and they're like, whoa. And then everyone's looking, because of my ass and titties. But then it got them looking, right?
It helps, honestly. Yeah. And so now moving forward in the music industry what is your next project?
We're doing a podcast too. So we're going to be releasing a podcast, but it's going to be everything. I'll talk about mental health. I'll talk about the drug addiction, helping people, but I'll also be talking about, sex and all kinds of fun stuff, having crazy people on. One thing about my personality is I'm definitely like a dichotomy, and I'm definitely very, I don't know. I just can't be put in a box. I've always said that. I flip around from one thing to the next. Some days I'm in the mood to be wild and crazy. The next day I'm like a little Dalai Lama. I'm like a mix of everything. I'm kind of wild and I think
that'll be interesting for a podcast.
Oh yeah. I do really great when I'm in those kind of environments. It's more of a chill, talking about serious stuff, but
I loved,
I don't have much of a
Caller
filter.
Daddy.
Oh yeah.
Or I think that's what it's called. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Could you give us some I don't know, shock value, crazy stories?
Shock value, crazy stories? I mean,
where do I begin?
Yeah, there's with the drugs or with the just
whatever
really
you think. I mean, it's mental health, so just blanket it over that.
Okay. Well, when I was basically at the end of my addiction, when it was really, really bad and I was at the peak of my mental illness kind of thing, I was getting into these crazy hoarder thing where I just didn't throw anything away, and my house was really disgusting and unkempt, to say the least. I was basically squatting in this house, and basically we had laundry built up floor to ceiling, and basically the maggots from the sink had gotten into it. It was just basically disgusting. And then I was just living in this kind of filth, and then that's when I basically got, and I got arrested, and I was able to go in and get clean. But during my stay in jail, I was literally sitting there the booking, and I was so dope sick that I was I was picking up things off the floor in the jail that were black, thinking it could have been heroin, and eating it.
God.
It was not heroin. I don't know what it was, but I'm surprised I don't have some crazy bacterial infection from that.
Thank God. Oh,
yeah, I don't think anything could live in me, to be honest, at that time. But yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of crazy stuff happen in my life. I'd have to narrow it down to what types of things.
Year?
I mean, when I was 6 years old. My dad was wrestling in a place in the islands. We were in the Virgin Islands or something like that. St. Martin, I don't know what those are. And there was like a whole bunch of like islanders around the wrestling match that wanted to get in, and they couldn't get in. And so they were throwing stuff to knock them off the walls, and they ended up causing like a huge riot, and they started chasing us through the streets. So like the wrestlers like were grabbing me. Like one of them had me, 𝐸𝐵 Von Erich, who was a big wrestler at the time. He had me over his shoulder, and we were like running to this ferry down the street, and they were throwing bottles and they were hitting the dudes in the head and stuff like that. Like hundreds of people.
They didn't care
really
that you were a
traumatizing.
child.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he ended up getting us to the ferry, which was this tiny little dinghy boat, and it was like really bad weather. And they pulled us onto he went onto the boat, and the ferry driver's like, we can't drive. And he's like, we can't stay here. You know, like it was my dad and like a few of the wrestlers, and then me and my mom. And they're like, we can't stay here. They're like, well, we can't take the boat. The weather is too crazy. And my dad like ended up like kind of assaulting the guy.
Oh, man.
And he was 400 pounds, you know? So the guy ended up taking the boat. And I remember pretty vividly being on that water and being really scared because the water was like really crazy. And we're already running from like all these people and shit. So yeah, it was a core memory, you know.
Yeah, I would think. Were you scared of water after that, or large crowds? I don't know.
Oh, I'm really scared of large crowds. Now you just opened a possibility of why I'm afraid of large crowds.
Well, at least you have your therapist.
Yeah. No, I'm healed. It's a work in progress always, but yeah.
So you're in Texas, and then what brought you out to California?
And my dad was an actor. So he started being in the movies. He was in Bulletproof with Damon Wayans and Adam Sandler. You know, we went on the red carpet for that. And then he was in Batman and Robin. He was Bane. We were on the red carpet for that. And so like it was like really like he was building up. He was going to be something like pretty big, you know. They were just going to start sending him scripts and stuff like that. And he was addicted to painkillers, and he was on a lot of steroids. So his body was too big and too overwhelmed for his heart to handle, you know. So if you're like 400 pounds, you know, 6'4", and you're sitting in a bed all day, and the only thing you do is get up and go work out for 4 hours and go back to the bed, you know, power lift, and then like, you know, your heart. He never did a cardio in his life. I don't think like he's eating like, you know, 300 grams of protein a day. You know what I mean? Like his kidneys, his everything, you know, and then the painkillers. So it was definitely a lot.
And then he passed away when you were how old?
12.
12. Okay.
Yeah. So that probably didn't have any help with the mental health stuff.
Yeah,
too.
that's young. I mean, that's exactly when you're growing, and
it's when it started getting really bad, right around 12. It's like then you go into like, you know, you get the hormones, all that stuff, and then it's like the depression and just the change and the death and all that stuff. It was definitely a big part of it. But I can honestly say that I was different. I was a happy-ish kid before that, but I always was lonely to some degree, I think, because I was very like, I'd isolate, and then I had like my one friend, and I was always different. So the kids were always, and I was always moving around too. So like you never really get comfortable anywhere. So yeah, it was definitely like it started early, me being different and wanting to fit in. And I remember being like, before my dad died, he basically was like, I was fine. No one was dead yet. And I was taking my mom's powder, like her makeup powder, and crushing it up and snorting it. And I said when I got like older, I was going to do coke, you know, because I mean, I saw my parents do it when I was little, you know, like I was really little. So I don't think they knew that I could remember, but I clearly remembered it because I remember like thinking like kind of like when you see your parents with a beer and you think it's cool, you know, like I think I saw that, or I was exposed to it. And it kind of like made me like think, oh, that's cool. But they were like, you know, party animals in the 80s, you know. I was born in 85, so.
Yeah, so what would your advice be now to someone who is like struggling to get help, struggling to want to change? What would you say to them?
Well, it depends on what they want help with. If they're not drug addicts and they just have mental health issues, I would definitely say to reach out to some groups, reach out to some therapists, start trying to get your feet wet a little bit and talk to some people about your feelings and all that stuff. And then, you know, start getting into like meditation and like somatic movements and eating healthy. Eating healthy, gut health, your gut's your second brain. I'm huge on a lot of mental health issues stem, like just like depression, anxiety stem from gut health. If you start working on like, what is it? Is it like a histamine intolerance? Is it because I have gut dysbiosis or whatever it is? Like those things, you know, start with the health part of it.
Right.
And if you're not getting better with having a clean diet or an antihistamine diet or an anti-inflammatory diet and like eating enough protein and doing all those things and then working out, getting out and walking, if you're still struggling that much after that, then start to go into, you know, okay, we need to talk to someone and then, you know, try and figure out like some other things. A lot of people have, it's a trauma thing, you know, we're all walking around kind of just wounded and we just need like to get it out and to process it. So, even I'm sure there's tons of YouTube videos. I'm sure there's tons of things like of people talking about how to like process trauma, doing inner child meditations. I love those. You know, you can go on YouTube and literally type in inner child meditations and kind of soothe your inner child and like you cry your ass off when you do them, but they're really, really good. And as if you're an addict and mentally ill or just an addict, get into a meeting, go to meetings every day and then, you know, try and find a rehab, try and just the willingness and to start like pushing past your, you know, meet people in the sobriety field, the ones doing it, not just talking it, because there's the ones that talk it. You see them stand up at the podium and they talk about all these things, and then you see them trying to screw the newcomer, or they're trying to do this or trying to do that. They're not walking it. They're not really about it. You know, stick with the winners, stick with the people that are doing, you know, practicing the principles, as they say.
Yeah. And you'll be able to see.
Yeah, getting a sponsor, getting into a meeting right there. It's free. People are giving it away. I sponsored people, you know. I haven't been sponsoring people right now, but I feel like my millions of followers are my little sponsees.
Yeah.
You know, I'm always spreading, you know, that's my way.
And you're still able to share your story on there.
Oh, yeah. This is my way of doing it, you know, and being creative and stuff. And I swear I had like an astrologer read my chart. She didn't even know about my accounts or anything like that. It was like all online. And she saw in like one of my placements, she was like, you have the ability to influence and millions of people and to basically live by example and heal people through example. And I was like, that's wild, because I have millions of followers and that's exactly what I feel like I do. So it's pretty cool.
And it's great that you're using it in a positive way. Like agreeing to be on this podcast.
Yeah, I have, you know, I have a motive on that.
Yeah, but it's a great motive.
Do you have
like helping people?
I noticed you kept on talking about like inner child type work, right? Do you have any advice for your inner child? Or if you could speak to your inner child, what would you say?
I mean, I do all the time. What would I say?
Because I was like, the reason why I asked, I had something like, I actually have kind of something similar to you. My mom passed away when I was 9. I was the only child. And I was like, I had this guy he was at another rehab facility. I guess I'll say it was like Hope by the Sea. And he'd make me like write all this stuff. Like he'd make me like write all these letters to, like, you know, of course, like mom, inner child, and like stuff like that. I just figured I'd focus on the inner child because that's what you mentioned. Yeah.
Definitely giving love to being the parent that you would have wanted, you know what I mean? Like, and not to say that, like, because I love my parents and my parents were great. They did the best with what they had, but they were doing what they had with what they had. And so like basically being the parent to them the way, you know, you would want someone to be, to, you know,
be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Like being safe, your safe space, your own safe space. You know, as an adult, you're not your inner child anymore. You have to almost like nurture them yourself as a parent.
You have kids, right?
No
kids. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm an alien. I'm gonna get beamed up. I'm not gonna have kids here.
Yeah. So how are we doing on time?
Yeah, you're at 45.
45.
So did we want to talk about the giveaway?
Yeah, I mean,
here?
why not?
Okay.
I thought it was cool that you actually, you know, are in recovery. You're in recovery. You got sober, and then you also help other people now, and you have your own way of doing that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do this podcast not only to be able to talk about it, but partly because I wanted to give away some recovery, some help for people that might want it. And you said that you would offer scholarships if I came on.
Yeah, we'll absolutely offer scholarships. You know, thank you for coming on. We really appreciate it. You know, we know you're doing a lot for us, and you know, we're really grateful.
Oh no, I really am grateful. I really want to be able to do something like this.
Yes.
I don't think I've ever seen it happen, and I don't know how it's going to go, but I would just like to see.
It's going to go really well.
Yeah, there's got to be a lot of people out there. As long as it's like, I want to see people that want it personally.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because I know I'm going to get a lot of people probably saying like, oh, my daughter or my son, and like, let's get them, you know, and you can't be the one to do it. You know, they have to be willing.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see, I don't know how you're going to do this, but I want to see like their stories and maybe like highlighting their stories of whoever the winner
that'd be
is,
cool.
you know.
So we can give away 2 initially and then get them in January.
Yeah.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Whenever.
And then what does that entail? Like basically like a detox kind of the first 30 days and a program, like what do they get out?
I mean,
So
I'm willing to do it until they complete, realistically.
Because we have detox res and we have PHP IOP, so they could do the whole thing.
Okay.
That'll
So that gives them
be
good.
close to like 4 months.
That would be amazing if people are willing to do it. That's why I want to pick the people wisely.
Because 30 days isn't enough.
I don't think it
30
is,
days
but
is nothing.
it gives people a start. That's why I was like, you know, some people people hit me up all the time. Like, how'd you do it? How'd you do it? And I'm like, well, I got arrested. I don't know if you want to do that. Like literally like the only reason. I'm honestly, if I'm being honest, I wouldn't have gotten clean. They had to lock me in a cage.
Sometimes something has to happen. It's like, you know, intervention.
Oh, God knew. He's
Yeah,
like,
that's what I was gonna
he's like, this bitch is not going to get clean. I literally told him like, man, I was like, how do I get out of this place? Like I am getting high. Like it was, you couldn't keep me from it. And even when, if you would have put me in a detox, I would have left the first day. There's no way I would have stayed. I was in a methadone treatment like before. Like I tried everything. I tried the Suboxone. I tried all the stuff. I don't personally like the Suboxone thing or anything like that, just because I think it does help people if maybe they detox off of it. But I just think you really got to do it the old fashioned way.
Now I used to feel that way about it, but since fentanyl, like,
it's scary. It is
like,
scary.
Because like literally they're just hitting it wrong with the lighter. You know what I mean? Like back in my day, it was like, okay, I had to know I was doing a little bit too much in the shot. But now it's like, oh, I didn't know how to light it properly off the foil, and like, you know, somebody dies.
Yeah, so that's true. That could definitely give me a different view on it, to the point of like there is something out there that's so dangerous, and they're people's kids and stuff like that, and like just having something that keeps them sober or keeps them, you know, alive.
Is really what it is.
Yeah.
Like, if you can extend like their time alive, maybe.
They didn't work. The Suboxone didn't work for me because I couldn't even get 24 hours to get, because you have to take Suboxone after kicking and being in fluid withdrawals. I couldn't even get 24 hours to take the damn Suboxone. So I was like, all right. And then my ex was like, okay, we have $100 left. You can use the $100. I'll kick the old fashioned way and you can have methadone. And so we went down to downtown LA and I would get methadone in line, and like he's sitting there shivering, you know, like dying, and I'm like passed out and on methadone on the bed. And then like 3 days later, 4 days later, like the week later, whatever, it would be like they start lowering that dose. And then I start not feeling it. I start having to stay awake a little more. And then I start, all those feelings that I have that I was covering up start coming up. And then I'm like, I'm going to go get high. And I remember just being like, are you kidding me? I just kicked the, you know, and then so I would go get a sack and then get him high again. You know what I mean? So like, I was just like, I'm not getting clean. I don't want to live like this. You don't want to live in my head. I don't want to live in this filth. And then you start getting clean and you look at your house, you feel that you smell everything. You just like
what was I doing?
Like, this is my life. Like, I don't even want to be here. You know what I mean? Like, so it's a escape. You just keep kind of going through that same door. But jail was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I don't even think they're arresting people anymore for using.
I don't know. I don't think that they really are.
Which is really sad, I think.
Citations, sometimes, I don't know.
It's like, yeah. It's like, unless you're already caught up in the system, like if you're caught up in the system, then it's like, you know, they're definitely gonna
I
arrest
still have
you.
a lot of clients with court cases.
I'd be dead. There's no way. If it was that time, there's no way.
Did you get sober before fentanyl?
Yes, thank God.
You did? It's such a different beast. I did too. I've never done it.
And I was a huge cocaine user, which is also getting laced a lot. Like, people are dying from that. My trainer that I had, he found a sack of what he thought was coke. It was like in a little baggie, and he did a line and died.
Oh my God.
Like, and yeah. So there's been a lot of just like, and people like just getting coke and they don't test it, and there's like a little bit of fentanyl in it or something. They're trying to get people hooked on it. Yeah.
It just like makes them that much more
potent. Yeah. And so I would get it from people all the time that I didn't know, like I'm like, oh, I can't get it from this guy. I'll get it from this guy. Like I wouldn't have even.
But still, it's like a street.
Yeah. And there was so many times where it would get laced with meth. Like I would have coke and there was meth in it, and you think I'm not going to do it? I don't have any other options, I hate meth. I was like literally like picking the little crystals out of it, trying to get just the coke. It was like picking the marshmallows out of the Lucky Charms. You know what I mean? I just can't do the crystal thing. But
yeah, I feel like in California they almost like give it away.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it. I don't know about like right now, but at least back then. Yeah, they'd like give you some meth if you bought a bag of dope sometimes.
Oh, really?
Because I don't know. I think they get it so cheap.
Yeah, because it's made in a freaking bathtub.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Plus we're so close to, that line, the border.
Yeah.
But
they weren't giving me heroin. That shit was expensive.
Yeah.
There was a point where I was doing like, 2 different types. I was doing like China white and black tar at the same time and coke. I was doing a little mixaroo. It's like, dude, I'd be so dead if it was now.
Oh yeah, so bad. It's way worse.
Yeah, it really bums me out because I was just like, there's so many people I know in recovery that are clean, but they go out. Like my girlfriend that I went to school with, we used to like hang out, and she'd be like shooting up in a room and stuff like that. She got sober. Literally 2 years later, she's in the recovery, everything. Now she's dead. It's like there's just so many like people that are, and
so many stories.
That wasn't even fentanyl. Like she just.
That was just heroin.
The problem is now people are getting on fentanyl, and then they get clean for a couple weeks or a couple months, and then they go back out to try and get fentanyl, and they die instantly.
That's where he's like, okay, the Suboxone
might help.
I'm a proponent of it, honestly, of Suboxone. I used to not be. I'm not on Suboxone. I got sober. When I look at myself, but.
I would always really try the sober thing first. You know what I mean? Just this, I definitely can see why Suboxone's not as.
I still I don't know. I mean, I'm not in recovery myself, and I can't give medical advice to my clients. But for what I've seen happen a lot with the clients is that they'll be on it just for a little bit, and then they eventually want to get off of it. And a lot of times the SUBLOCADE shot's been helping them.
SUBLOCADE is really good too.
How are you feeling about isn't the detox off of Suboxone worse than the detox off of heroin?
There's like ways kind of around it now. It's weird.
Oh really?
The SUBLOCADE, if you like take the SUBLOCADE shot in certain sequences, it can be not so bad.
If they're on it for long term, yes. But if they get off of
like
it
just
pretty
a detox
quick,
dose.
or
Yeah, a lot of
if they
people are
get
maintenance.
The SUBLOCADE shot, that will keep them from those major withdrawals that they're having. So that's why I like the shot.
I never heard of that.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some things have changed.
Yeah.
Like I said, I couldn't even get on Suboxone because I couldn't get 24 hours.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm not doing 24 hours dope sick. And especially when people always think like, oh, you're shooting it, it's worse. Shooting it'll take you down a darker path. You know what I mean? There's a part where I noticed like once people put a needle in their arm, it just goes like even worse. Like I don't even know how much worse I could have gotten, but I'm sure it was worse. But detoxing off of smoking it compared to shooting it, I heard is like worse.
Yeah.
Because
I can't imagine that,
when you're smoking it, you're getting it in your lungs, you're getting it in your like everything. You know what I mean? When you're shooting, it's cleaner. And it goes in your bloodstream and it comes out.
I never understood why, but I that's what people were telling
when I was
me.
in jail, the girls were like, oh, okay, they're giving me their cookies and stuff trying to help me out. Of course, I'd puke it up right away, but they're like, okay, are you shooting it or smoking? And I was like, oh, smoking, it's fine. And they're like, oh. They were all like, you're so screwed. I was like, and I'm telling you, when I detoxed off that stuff, it was, I'll never forget it. It was the worst detox. Like I came off of painkillers 40 a day by myself with no detox facility, and I was sick, but I made it and it wasn't horrible. This was like train spotting shit. You know what I mean? Like just completely hallucinating, like throwing up everywhere. Like I didn't even know where I was. Like I couldn't keep
This
even
was the time at jail?
water down. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot of narcos too. Like 400. That's 400 milligrams.
Yeah.
I mean, even the Tylenol alone is.
The key is you take 4, you peak, you take 4, you peak, you take 4, and then 10 times a day. by the end of the night, you've taken 40. And it's quite easy, actually.
That's insane.
Yeah, I didn't. And the doctor was like, when I told him how many I took when I was trying to get clean, he was like, how are you alive? He's like, we literally had a guy come in here today and we had to put a toe tag on him because he had taken like 30 or something like that.
The Tylenol was like really bad. It's horrible for your liver.
I know. I'm still working on liver health.
One question we usually ask a lot is like, what do you think came first, the mental health or the substance abuse?
The mental health.
The mental health.
Because I think, because knowing how it is now, and I can't even say that because I'm forever going to keep the mentality that I'm an alcoholic. There's no doubt about it. And I won't go, and I don't use no matter what. But there's a part of me that knows deep down after doing all the work that I did. One, I have zero interest in checking out. I don't like to even take anything, even a supplement that makes me feel different. Never felt that way in my life. And I just don't have the desire at all. And I know if I took something, I would be repulsed by it and not want to take it because it would make me feel different. And I like being sober now. So I think the mental health, if I wasn't so sick and I wasn't so sad and I wasn't trying to like medicate myself, I think I would have probably never gotten addicted like the way I was. You know, I have an addictive personality. Like with health and fitness, I tend to go hard on everything. But unresolved trauma is what got me as dark as I believe it got. You know.
And so are there any things, you know, just because we're doing the rehab giveaway, I guess you could call it, what are some of the things that you take with you today that you picked up at the Rock Center?
Well, everything, but
I guess the main
definitely
ones.
Who the fuck am I? I'm not that special, you know, because it's given me humility that I didn't have. And, you know, not being in like a really, really nice place and like just basically realizing that I'm the same as pretty much everybody else in a lot of ways. And then just basically life on life's terms, you know, that was a huge one. Basically just like accepting things as they are is like the key to sobriety in a lot of ways, because we always think if we can change or we can be the captain of everything, like we're gonna somehow will things the way we want them to be willed, but it's not how it goes. Like that, yeah, you have to trust God and help others and just wait for what's meant to be. But also like manifest. You can manifest.
I agree.
100%. Manifestation is a fact. So I'm not saying this is life. I'm just saying like accept life, accept things as they come, and then manifest the best. Like I will get better. I am better. I am this is happening for me. I am not this person. I'm, you know, and just constantly focusing on those things. Yeah.
Do you have like a specific daily routine that you follow?
Super routine. Yeah. No, I'm very routine.
How's it look?
I wake up and I get dressed. I do my first like little mini breakfast. I go to my training session. Come back, eat my second breakfast, which is like, I always do protein forward. I take my supplements, which is like, you know, vitamin D and like my B vitamins, all that stuff. I have like a 10-step skincare routine. I haven't been meditating as much lately, but usually I'll do like a meditation in the morning and one at night. And I love Joe Dispenza.
I love Joe Dispenza.
So good and like really like gets you like amped. It's almost like gets you like hyped, you know.
Like the science, yeah. The science behind visualization, like all that stuff. Cool.
Yeah, I tend to like try and keep myself outside as much as possible because I feel like if I sit in the house too long, I'll start scrolling, and me being a little dopamine rat sometimes, like that scroll will keep you like locked in. So I'll try and like, you know, go on a hike or go ride my horse, something like that. But mostly I just have like a pretty stringent like morning and nighttime routine. You know, when I go to sleep, I definitely like go in around 9 to 10, sit. I don't go on this phone. I don't scroll. I'll watch like a show or I'll read. I love to read like scientific stuff about like the brain and about longevity and about, you know, just understanding. I was a psychology major at one point. So like just anything with that, I love.
I'm reading a book right now on the gut and gut health.
Oh,
We
yeah.
Send it to you.
Gut health that's my
Yeah.
jam. I did a whole year-long gut health journey, and it made a huge difference. You can literally, because your serotonin's made in your gut, you can feel like the serotonin, that like warm fuzzy feeling when you start to heal your gut come back. It's wild. Like, I'm very in touch with my body though, so some people are like, I don't get it, and I'm like, no, I can feel it.
Well, especially after you do all that work and the somatic work.
Oh yeah, I feel
gets-
everything.
yeah.
I'll literally, like, any little difference, I'm like, I'm off today. Something's off, you know? And then I'll like kind of, what Glenn always tells me to do is like drop into my body, check in, like, okay, what's going on? What are you feeling? You know,
am
like
I
if something
feeling it?
triggers me, I'll like, usually it would let me spin out and I'd be like, oh yeah, fuck that motherfucker. Da, da, da. And I'm just like, now I'll go, wait a minute. Why is this affecting me? What is it in me that's resonating with this, you know? And usually you'll get a message, you know, if you're really listening, you'll get a message like, oh, this makes you feel less than. This person's making you feel small, and you're not, you know, like this, or you feel small because this, or, you know, whatever it is. No one can make you feel anything. But, and you start to kind of like process it on your own. You learn your little tools to like go, okay. And then you're like, I'm not so mad anymore, you know?
Understanding.
I do a lot of understanding and empathizing these days, which I never did before. I was a narcissist, remember? Like, now I'm the most empathetic person. I'm like, obviously that shit is not all what they say,
Yeah.
you know? Like, they have no empathy. And I'm like, I'm literally like, I see like an animal, anything. I'm like, oh my God, I like feel everybody's pain.
Yeah. I also feel like there was a time where therapists were just overdiagnosing
Yeah.
that like crazy.
It's part of the system. I feel like it's kind of like just that revolving door, like you were talking about.
Yeah. Plus, like the things that she was diagnosing me the narcissism on, I was going through a breakup and I was going through a lot of weird things. And so those triggers and those behavior like patterns were getting really crazy because I was trying to control, because I didn't want to be abandoned really deep down. Like, I don't want to be abandoned. So what I'm doing is I'm like controlling. Oh yeah, well, let me manipulate this person to feel this. And I never want to let this person go. And I never want. And so like she's like, whoa, narcissism. And I'm like, no, it's a little girl in there that's afraid to be left and is afraid of not having love. And then they're trying to move everything around to make it.
fear-based.
Yeah. Fear-based.
At that point, she should just be like trauma.
Well, that's why she didn't stay my therapist.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
And I found the right person, you know, and he was like, oh, I was like, well, I've been diagnosed with, I was all triggered when I was talking to him the first time. And I was like, and I'm this and I'm that. And he goes, you're none of those things. And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, the therapists have told me, I've had multiple therapists diagnose me. And he's like, I'd say you're triggered about 90% of the time. And this is what's really going on. And he literally just shut me up and was like, okay, we're going to do this. This is how your brain works. This is how we reprogram you. You're a computer, you know? And
You are what you believe.
yeah, you can brainwash yourself. I'm really good at brainwashing myself. And it's worked out.
It's amazing. Yeah. So any, I guess, last words or things that you want to share on the podcast?
Fuck bitches, get money. No, just that I'm really excited to do the Christmas giveaway and hopefully get some people that really, really want this help. It's a really big gift. So,
Well, I guess I have one last question then.
Okay.
What are you looking for in those? Like, what do you think would speak to you? Where you?
well, who wants to put the shovel down, basically. I want to see people that really are like willing to do whatever it takes. I will go tomorrow. I want this. This is something, and not people that are like, oh, well, I got my this and I don't want to, you know, if you're not ready, it's not going to work. You know, you really have to be done, you know.
I'm sure you can tell.
To some degree, I think. I don't know. I haven't gotten, maybe it'll be harder than I think. Maybe it'll be more people than I think that are, you know, but we'll see.
It's going to be cool to see. Yeah.